Welcome to the ExecMBA podcast. I'm your host, Brett Twitty, and you are listening to a new episode. On this episode of the podcast, I'm excited to share my recent conversation with Stu Neifert. Stu is a second-year student in our Executive MBA class of 2025, and he and I recently connected to talk more about his background, his decision to pursue an MBA, what led him to Darden, his favorite memory from the program thus far, the impact of his time at Darden, and so much more. I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. As always, if this conversation is helpful for you, please like this episode and subscribe to the ExecMBA podcast so you never miss an update. And remember, you can always check the episode description for links to Darden blogs, social channels, and more. And now, without further ado, here's my interview with Stu Neifert. Stu, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Brett.
It's great talking with you. How is everything? How are you doing?
I'm good, man. Little bittersweet. We just finished Q6. But that means that the structure around the core classes is over. But it also means we're about to go into electives, which is exciting. So I'm excited for that.
Yeah, it feels like the ending of something and the beginning of something else, right? Even though you're still within the same 21-month cohort program, there are kind of some choose your own adventures aspect of the electives. So not everybody's on exactly the same schedule, depending upon the electives that they choose. And yeah, it's all kinds of, I think there's a lot more flexibility than people realize in that elective period. And that's something that I've tried to underscore in some of our recent webinars, just to help people understand, well, there are electives that meet on Friday, there are electives that meet on Saturday and Sunday morning, Saturday and Sunday afternoon. You could do an independent study, do a J-term elective. You could go on additional global residencies, get ahead on your credit counts, maybe have a lighter elective quarter. So many things can happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was speaking with an incoming student this morning, actually, and she asked about the electives versus the core. And I said, I'm actually surprised at how many electives there were to choose from, and how it's actually difficult to pick because there's so many good ones. and so it's nice I am excited to enter this phase, but yeah, you never know who's going to be there, which weekend, so anyway, we'll see.
Yeah, you have a total of 12 electives to take. There's typically somewhere in the neighborhood of about 40 electives to choose from, typically about 10 electives per elective quarter, and there's 4 elective quarters, 8 months essentially of electives. So that's a lot to choose from. And of course, you could even take electives with the part-time MBA students. The J-term electives are offered across program. We have some J-term electives, January term electives that have full-time MBA, part-time MBA, and executive MBA enrollment in them. So yeah, this is a time of tremendous flexibility and when it comes to electives at Darden, in a way that I think if you go back when I first started here was not even on the horizon. And now here we are with these 3 programs, a full-time MBA, part-time MBA, and executive MBA. And a lot of thought has gone into, like, how do we give students the choice potentially to take an elective outside of their program if they can make that schedule work, if there's still space available in the elective. So exciting time. So how did you think about what electives that you wanted to take?
Yeah, so I was just going to speak to your J-term comment, and I'm taking the CEO leadership with Dean Beardsley in Charlottesville and for J-term, and I'm really excited for that. But I came into to Darden looking for the general management MBA, and we can talk more about why I chose Darden later if you'd like. But part of it was I wanted to get a well-rounded education, but something I am specifically interested in is finance. And so I did an entrepreneurship. And so I definitely loaded up a little bit on those two, mostly because I feel it's where I have the least experience, but the most interest moving forward in my career. And so signed up, tried to prioritize those classes. I'm also part of the executive fund on that executive fund at Darden. And so we have to take the securities analysis and valuation and then the DEF final in Q10 class. So that made it a little easier for 2 of the courses, but I'm interested in them anyway. So it's great. So I think my approach was still you get that well-roundedness, but kind of load up on the finance and entrepreneurship.
Yeah, it's always interesting to hear how people choose those classes. I mean, you got a lot to choose from, to your point. And so how do you narrow in? That's one of my favorite questions to ask here on the podcast. So Stu, before we go much further, it's worth having you share a little bit about yourself. So tell us more about who you are and your background.
Yeah, sure. So Stu Neifert, Darden class of 25, MBA class of 25. Proud member of the original Section B and the best learning team at Darden, LT20. I'm a Seaville native, Charlottesville native, but I've been living in Baltimore for over a decade now. I live in Patterson Park neighborhood with my wife and daughter, and I work nearby. I work at Johns Hopkins Technology Ventures, where I help commercialize scientific discovery at Johns Hopkins University. So kind of like the business side of science.
How did you get interested in pursuing an MBA?
Yeah, so it's a great question. Before I came to JHTV, I was a researcher at Hopkins at the School of Medicine for almost a decade, and loved research and loved biomedical research. Loved my the boss in scientific research is called a PI, so principal investigator. I loved the people I worked for, but I kind of have always naturally gravitated towards leadership roles, and so I started to do that within the lab and started to get more involved in managing. It's a big lab, 40 people, and that's like a small biotech company. And so I gravitated towards that management, those management roles, and realized, well, hold on, I don't really know much about management besides what kind of intuitively comes to me. And so maybe I should get an MBA. And so I started looking around 2016, 2017-ish. But I just felt it was too early and I didn't know what I wanted to do next. And so I decided to instead get a technical degree at Hopkins part-time. And so I did a biotechnology degree. But during that degree, I was able to concentrate in biotechnology enterprise. And those classes were around IP and venture creation. And I just really was interested in this and became kind of like, more interested in that kind of route. And at the same time, our laboratory had a company spin out. And I thought that was super exciting. And there was an opportunity for me there in a technical role, which I just didn't want. I wanted to move into kind of the leadership and business role. And so I said, well, how can I leverage my technical background and my interest in biomedical science and commercialization with this newfound interest in kind of the business side? And so I moved into tech transfer at JHTV and realized, okay, I'm really going to need an MBA now. Like I'm going to need to learn these business foundations if I'm going to be advising faculty on their company formation and financial strategy and commercialization strategy. I need to learn this stuff, and I'm learning through the job, but luckily also learning a lot at Darden as well.
Very interesting to hear the twists and turns in that story, and also that you had thought about an MBA for, gosh, doing the math here, 7, 8 years or so before taking the plunge.
Yeah, it's interesting. As part of the leadership communications course that we took in, I think, Q3, we had this kind of side quest to work with 2 of our classmates and use a story to kind of get a business point across. And the one that I used, I'll spare some of the specifics, but it was around like making a plan and how plans matter, and you don't have to follow them kind of step by step, but having a rough outline for what you want to do is important. And when I got the job at JHTV, I fortuitously kind of found this old Excel sheet kind of write-up that I had done back in the laboratory when I was young and trying to figure out what am I going to do with my life. And what I had put on there was, I want to eventually get a job at JHTV, and I want to do my MBA so I can learn these things to ultimately become a leader and executive in the biotech space. And here I am. These things are happening. And so I thought about it for a while, but it took a while to get here, to kind of like you said, twists and turns, and to figure out if this really is right for me and if I'm sure, and finally became confident in what I wanted to do and had the vision. And so here we are.
I think that's so important for people to hear, though, because it feels very real to me. Talked to a number of prospective students. Many people have thought about this step off and on, maybe thought about a full-time MBA to a residential path and didn't work out at that time. And now here they are back thinking about doing an executive MBA or a part-time MBA. It is oftentimes a long consideration cycle because you're trying to find that time when it makes sense for you personally, makes sense for you professionally. And, you need to have that sort of idea of where you're going at the end of all of this, or at least, have hypothesis tested some of these things. So yeah, that takes some work.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right. So how did you get interested in Darden specifically?
Yeah. So I mentioned earlier, I'm a Charlottesville area native. So I've been I grew up rooting for the Who's and going to Scott Stadium and Fridays After Five and the whole thing. And so I had this affinity for Charlottesville and the university in general. Um, I did consider other schools, just as a good measure, and trying to be well rounded and be diligent and make sure you make the right. This is a huge decision, so I wanted to make the right one. But UVA was always my top choice, and ultimately it came down to a few things. Um, One, as I mentioned earlier, I wanted that general management education. So I, was a biology major in undergrad, got a degree in Hopkins, a technical degree in biotechnology. And so I have that technical background, but I never really got the business exposure or marketing exposure. I needed that kind of well-roundedness, and I was interested in that. I wanted the case method. That was very important to me. So I don't want a passive experience. I want an active and engaging experience. And I want to learn from my classmates. And so the case method was important to me. I want to be in the DMV long term, and the network, UVA and Darden's network in this area is really strong. And so that was important. I wanted a top ranked program. I wanted an elite, highly ranked and well regarded program, and Darden absolutely has that. Most people listening to this probably already know this, but if you don't, we were just ranked the #1 public business school in the world by the Financial Times. And importantly, I think this rankings are rankings, but the Princeton Review does one that I really like, where they take kind of the different verticals in which you could be ranked, a business school could be ranked in the top 10, and they find which schools were consistently ranked in the top 10 for all of those verticals. And Darden regularly is the #1 school when you look at it that way. And what that says to me is it's a school that's well-rounded, and that's important to me. That's kind of a value that I have, well-roundedness and doing things holistically. And so that was important. So it's a top-ranked program. And then finally, not just a strong network in a specific area, but a strong network in general, where like people really respond to you. And Brett, I remember when I was first a prospective student, I asked you if you could connect me with some students, and they were all super responsive. And I don't think I spoke with one who didn't then connect me with another student or alumni. And so I did my diligence there, and it is true. It's a very strong network, and that was a real signal for me that this was a good decision.
All right. Well, I appreciate that. I'm picking up on the fact that you are a pretty structured thinker, right? You have these things. You mentioned a plan earlier that, these sort of check boxes, the things that you were weighing and you were thinking about, the kind of experience you had, the kind of programs that you wanted to go to. And, I think that's so important for prospective students to be more inwardly focused when they're trying to find a school that makes sense, because you're going to get a lot of opinions from people. You can read on the internet. There's however many rankings, but at the end of the day, it's important for you to know what you're looking for and what you want from a school and out of this experience, kind of people you want to be surrounded with. Can sometimes be easy to lose track of that, though.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of things that can kind of derail you from your initial gut opinion. And as I mentioned, I looked at other schools, and for a while I was considering another one pretty strongly. And you can get lost in this kind of search. And so what I just took the end of a weekday, I think it was a Friday, and took off work early and kind of said, all right, I need to make a decision in the next few days. What do I really want? And you can sit down, and it's funny, we just ended marketing, and in marketing there's this thing called laddering, and you basically find out what someone's real drive is for a product, why they really want this Oreo or whatever it is. It's because they want their kids to like that or whatever, you know what I mean? And so you can kind of sit down and do a little bit of that with yourself and say, what do I really want? And so I did that. And I said, I wanted this case method, and I want this type of profile of person that I want to be associated with. And these values that Darden have are the same as mine. And so this is the right decision for me, despite the noise around me.
All right. So you come to Darden, you're brand new first year student. Obviously, you're a year in now, but can you remember back when you were a quarter or two in, and what the adjustment was like for you and your family?
Oh, man. Yeah, it is definitely an adjustment. So I had done, as I mentioned, a master's degree while working before, but I was younger, and I was not yet married, and I did not yet have a daughter, and so it was just different. And also, I wasn't as high up in my career, and so the responsibilities that I had in the workplace were fundamentally different. So the adjustment this time was real. It was serious, and I think I expected it to be difficult. But it's just no matter what you expect, there are going to be things that you couldn't have accounted for. But I will say it is absolutely manageable. So it is a lot of work, but it's totally manageable. And LR1 was just more than anything a blast. I mean, it was really fun to kind of really it's great that they do it this way where you do a week immersion because you get to know people quite well within a week. And you really get to understand the case method by doing it all day, 5 days in a row.
Case method obviously was something that you were really attracted to as a prospective student. What was it like to be in those case discussions? Was it an adjustment as well?
Yes, it was. But I had kind of a sneak peek, and I would give to anyone who's listening who's a prospective student, I would say do a campus visit to Roslyn if you can, specifically if you're looking at the executive program. So I did that, I think at least once, and you get to sit in on a live case. And the one I remember to this day, the one I sat in on actually, it was an accounting class, but they were talking about ESOPs, employee stock option plans. And I had zero experience in that. Never was part of that or anything, and not an accountant by any means. And so it was all new material to me, but I walked out feeling like, oh, I could talk about ESOPs. Like I got this. And it was cool to hear what was unique and interesting about the case was that I think it was Napster was the case, but they were talking about ESOPs, and near the end of the class, one of the students raised her hand and was like, "Hey, I work at it was Amazon or Facebook, one of the tech companies, and I get paid in stock options. I feel like maybe I'm misunderstanding this part." And instead of the faculty responding and telling her some of the details, another student raised her hand and said, this is what I do. I sell and provide stock options as like my job. And so they just had a side conversation and explained it to each other. And I was like, this is cool. This is what I'm expecting and hoping for. And that's what I got. And within the first week at LR1, you find like you'll be sitting next to someone who is an expert in one of the cases. And then the next class, maybe you're the expert and you get to speak up. And the faculty do a great job at kind of facilitating and giving the ground that you need to kind of take the conversation in whatever way it goes, but you never know where it's going to end up and who in the room is going to have expertise or experience in a certain topic.
I'm curious about how you manage your time, kind of approached doing work in life and school all at the same time. What's been your approach? How have you managed all this?
Yeah, it's difficult. I think I was telling one of my colleagues the other day who asked like how things are going. I said I'm really really happy with all the things that are happening in my life. My family's great. I really enjoying my job and doing well there and liking it. And Darden's awesome and what I thought it would be. My frustration is that I can't give each of those things 100%. That's really difficult for me. And I think a lot of folks who go to business school have similar personality types. They're driven. They're overachievers. This is like kind of a, so I think that folks when they enter Darden or business school in general and might struggle with this. But you just have to carve out time when you can. Let go of let go of the perfectionism desire. Like you have to learn to let that go. Lean on your classmates when you can. But just do your best. I don't know. It's very difficult. So what I do, and one of my like takeaways for incoming students is to very early on if you have a spouse or a partner or whatever, put your time on a calendar and just be very upfront and kind of say, I need this time on this Sunday morning or after class on this day or before class on this day to do to do some case prep and just find the pockets and be strict about it. Because otherwise work will creep in or life will creep in and you won't ever be able to do one of those three things that you're trying to spend your time on, at least for me. But you need to be regimented to an extent and also flexible. So it's kind of it's a weird, I'm saying two things at once, but it's true. You need to, on one hand, regiment, but then be ready to be flexible if it doesn't work and make sure to make time for yourself and your family. That's, for me, the most important thing.
Yeah, I've talked to a number of students who actually say they schedule family time and, activities with their spouse or whatever on the calendar as well, so that people on their learning team or whoever else has access to that calendar can see that they have a commitment and they put it on their schedule. So it's equal to the stuff they're doing at school or stuff that they're doing at work. It's also a
100%.
non-negotiable.
100%. I told when my learning team in LR1, you sit down with your learning team and you say, how are we going to, what's our format for working together moving forward? And it's an important meeting, and you should really spend time on that and take it seriously, because it is kind of going to inform how you do things the rest of the experience. And what I told them, I have a young daughter. I said between 5 o'clock and 7 o'clock Eastern time, I don't exist, because that's time for me and my daughter, my wife. And so after that, when she's in bed, I'm all yours. I'm up till whatever you need. But between 5 and 7, that's Eleanor time, and Alex, my wife and daughter time. So, and they were like, "Great, totally get it, no problem. So we'll talk after class or whatever it is." So, yeah, it's important to do that.
Yeah, and I think what you learn as you go through this program, or it's certainly been my experience being around students going through this program, is there's always going to be someone with way less on their plate than you. And there's always going to be someone with way more on their plate than you. You can look at both directions and find
100%.
people who fit those descriptions. Your point about letting go of the perfectionism, to me, that is the hardest thing for the kinds of people who do executive MBA programs to wrap their head around. It is so hard, but so important.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I think it's been an adjustment for me as well, because you want to go in and have every single case 100% prepped, and you want to have your model perfect so that you can answer each question, and it's just not realistic, honestly. But I think that's kind of an analogy to professional life. You're not going to always be 100% prepped for every single meeting or every single presentation you give. But what you can do, what you can control, is I'm going to put in my very best, and I'm going to, put in a good faith effort to try to be prepared for everything that I'm going into. And I think that's true for the case method, certainly. And people are nervous for cold calls, and you become less nervous over time, because either you become calloused by the repetition of it, or rather you learn okay, what I need to do here is not be perfect. What I need to do is have prepared, have an opinion on the topic, and be ready to back that up with data or serious thought. And if you've done that, then you're ready. No one's expected to have the exact perfect whack every single time, or that's the finance term or whatever. You don't have to have a beautiful model and the exactly right terminal value. Okay. Give it a shot. Have reasoning for why you made those decisions, and have conviction in that, and be ready to learn from the classmates if you did in fact do it wrong. Be ready to hear the other side.
Yeah, I think this has been my impression just from talking with prospective students. I think when they hear the case method, they get locked in this idea of oh, it's participatory and you have to have the right answer. This whole idea of right and wrong, and you're supposed to call on you and you're going to be wrong and it's going to be terrible. It's not that way. Even a wrong answer can be really helpful to the discussion. The idea is that you're taking a position, you're defending that position, you're providing evidence, and then other people will respond to it. And maybe you were off and you have to pivot, but it's not about right and wrong so much. I don't know if that squares with your experience.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And even so totally agree. First of all, I would say that it is less about right and wrong and more about okay, how are you viewing this, and why? What is your kind of rationale for why you're approaching the problem this way, and why you've taken why is that your takeaway rather than this, etc. There are occasions where you can do something kind of objectively wrong. But you can learn from it, right? So there's this funny moment. There was this funny moment in operations too, where my classmate and I, Rebecca, we fundamentally misunderstood something and did something very wrong. But it was funny, and also an opportunity for us to kind of say, oh, now we can learn from this funny moment and say, there's another way to kind of approach this problem. We just fundamentally misunderstood, but it's a learning opportunity, right? And the nice thing about the Darden classroom experience is there's no shaming for that. We all kind of laughed and said, okay, well, this is how we would do it. And you live and you learn. But yeah, no, you're right. The idea of right and wrong is very very rarely the occasion. It's much more about how you approach the problem and why you chose that rationale and that position and how you can back it up.
Yeah, I think what's interesting to me about the experience is that there's all this, you can't get an MBA because you want to know more about finance, accounting, you want to grow as a leader, but there's a lot of like personal development that happens through the program that's sort of embedded within the experience, right? Having to speak up, having to hear other people's perspectives, having to defend a position or articulate a viewpoint to people who do not share your background and experience. I mean, there's a lot. And then, of course, the psychological thing that we talked about earlier, letting go of stuff and prioritizing things, what's most important right now. Like that's really important for senior leaders.
100%. I think, yeah, I think from my like personal experience within the program, I definitely feel a lot more confident in the workplace, and a large part of that is just um, kind of like the reps you put in, like you said, of public speaking and challenging each other's ideas, and also it is a lot of demystification of what is this finance thing you're talking about, or what is this marketing, like what is this kind of business language that, to me, for someone who's used to talking about mitochondria and cell membranes and stuff, it's a foreign language in the same way that for some people like sodium potassium pump means nothing. For me, credits and debits were a totally new thing. So there's part of that which gives you confidence, but also like learning from your classmates and being I don't know, hearing from them like, hey, that was a good idea, or like, I like your approach on this thing. This actually, I hadn't thought about that. And then vice versa, learning new things from them and saying, oh, now I'm equipped with this kind of approach and kind of mindset about this sort of problem that I just had no idea about before. And so I feel like even within a year, I've gained a lot more confidence in my own workplace, and it's definitely showing. I even folks within my organization are saying, "Oh, the MBA is paying off. Like we're already seeing it here at GHTV, and that feels really good."
Well, a couple more questions for you, Stu. You're a Batten Scholar here, so you want to talk a little bit more about what being a Batten Scholar is and what it's meant for your time here at Darden?
Yeah. I was so excited to be tapped as a Batten Scholar, and the first thing I'll say is that my fellow Batten Scholars, so um, Chantal, Chris, and Danny, are just incredible. I mean, they're really, really smart and talented people, and so to be considered alongside them is awesome. And the chats that we've had kind of on the side about the things we're doing have been really great. And I know that that Anna and and the crew at Batten are trying to bring more stuff up to the Northern Virginia Roslyn area, and that's been fun to work with them on that kind of process and the work that they're doing. But I'm really excited about, I'm doing Venture Lab as one of my electives with Jason Brewster. And when I first was applying to Darden, and I don't know if I'd gotten in yet, but I asked if I could chat with him, and he took a phone call with me, and I said, "Look, I'm really excited about Darden in general, but I'm curious about the entrepreneurship opportunities and how I can kind of test some ideas out during my time as an MBA student." And he said, "Well, if you get the opportunity, think about Venture Lab." And so I'm excited to be doing that, and excited to work more with the Batten Institute and to kind of test out some of these ideas I have kind of in a lab like environment. And so anyway, no, it's been really cool. And I know Carlos has also been doing a lot. He's a former MBA himself from Darden, and he's been doing a lot to get the tech community kind of more centralized and stronger within the Northern Virginia area. And I know that people like Chantal are really interested in that kind of tech space, and Chris, and as am I. And so that's been cool. And then finally, I'll just say the Venture Capital Conference, the first one ever, was held at Roslyn, and I was lucky enough to go to that one, and that was really cool to bump into my classmates and folks from the LVG at UVA and some other kind of Batten affiliated folks. So that was really cool.
Yeah, there's all kinds of things happening, and there's a lot of activity here in Northern Virginia increasing. So, to your point, the Venture Capital Conference, we had an AI conference here back in winter. We have had various other sort of venture capital related activities. We've had a VC boot camp here in the past, a number of speakers as well. Friday Night Live, oftentimes for executive MBA students, we'll touch on entrepreneurship or some Baton related activities. So yeah, a lot is happening. And Carlos Bordoni has been here on has been here on the podcast. Anna Fife has been on the podcast as well, and Chantal has also been on the podcast. So everybody should check out those episodes if you're curious about the Baton Institute and these people and the work that they do. So Stu, I'm curious, a few more questions here for you. So what's been your favorite thing about your time at Darden so far?
Oh man, the weekends in Roslyn are really fun. And despite all of the hard work, it's really nice to like kind of get on campus. You feel like, at least I do. I feel excited to see my classmates, and the learning experience is really fun. So like the class, even the classes itself are, you come because you want to learn, but they're also enjoyable. And the faculty are funny and engaging. And a lot of them have real world experience in the field that they're a professor in as well. It's not just pure academics all the time, which is really nice. And so I would say, like, just generally showing up to Roslyn, once a month and kind of spending a few days with your friends and learning is great. But it's hard to beat LR1. It was so much fun, and like it's a nice kind of memory to go back to when times are tough, and you can say, "All right, that was really fun," and I really, at least for our learning or our cohort, we really bonded in that first week. You take some classes that make you really think about who you are and what your goals are, and some folks really opened up and were vulnerable, and that I think was a great tone to set for the rest of the experience, because people were open and honest, and you got to know each other on a different level, which was great very quickly. And that's important for kind of building trust in the classroom at a place like Darden that does case method, where you really need to be able to open up and kind of dig in. And so I think that maybe that was one of my favorite experiences. Yeah.
Of course, you have another week-long residency in Charlottesville coming up in let's say about 8 or so months from now, maybe April. Can you believe it? That you're that close?
Yeah, I cannot, man. A bunch of my colleagues have asked, like, "Oh, aren't you done with the MBA?" And I'm like, "I'm not. It's But what I had been telling them was like, I'm not even halfway through actually. But now I had that line in my head, and I went to say it the other day, and I'm like, "Oh gosh, no, I'm over halfway through," which is wild. And so very much looking forward to LR2 and being down in Charlottesville. For the nice part is that you're there for a week, kind of unencumbered by work, and you're with each other. And so I'm excited for that, but I'm also, in a similar fashion to how I started the podcast, that's going to be bittersweet, right? Because it's going to mean the end of the program, and so that'll be a little sad. But yeah, no, looking forward to that for sure.
Well, what has been the impact of the program for you thus far? I recognize you still got elective quarters to go here. Still got 8 more months or so in the program.
Yeah. It's been huge. I mentioned earlier that I definitely feel more confident in the workplace, for sure. I very recently was invited to pitch this kind of new idea I had for our operations to the senior team, actually in DC at a retreat, a senior leadership retreat. And, I just felt very confident going into that meeting because of the prep I had gotten in my coursework and kind of the confidence that has been built through my interaction with my classmates. But I would say there are key kind of lessons that I've learned from specific classes that I'm implementing in the workplace now. And that's part of the value of the MBA, right? Is that you're taking classes, but you're going to work that next day. And so you can deploy them right away. And so, for example, in our leadership comms class, we learned to deliver difficult news. And I've had to do that since then, both upwards and downwards within the org structure. And it's definitely helped me kind of prep for that moment, and I think perform. And then even, very specific tactical and technical things like within the decision analysis course, the second one, it's like statistical mostly based. and I knew some of this stuff, but I didn't use it as much. But we used regression models, and I was able to take some of what I learned in that class and apply it to work and say, what's the impact of our translational funds? Can we run a regression and see that there's a significant effect of folks that receive? And turns out it does have an effect, and that's very interesting. So there's been like ways for me to pull specific kind of things I've learned in class into my workplace on a tactical level, but then on a strategic level, like I said, I just feel a lot more confident, and my network has really grown. And so if I am confused or wanting to learn more about a specific topic within the workplace, I have a bunch of different people I can grab at OGR or call, which is nice.
The last question for you. What's a piece of advice you would share with our prospective student listeners, something you would encourage them to think about as they go forward on their own MBA journeys?
Yeah. The first thing I'll say is, for someone who didn't do it and wishes he did, do the Gemba. So I'm very excited for my global residency in Finland and Estonia. Can't wait. I'm going to try, I think, to add Vietnam or Spain for the last global residency. But I wish I would have done that. And so I think it's difficult. And so, like, not everyone can do it. Just, logistically, the schedules are difficult. But if you can, you should do it. I haven't talked to anyone who's doing the Gemba who regrets it. So just put it that way. That'd be my first thing. My second piece of advice would be, as I mentioned earlier, if you do have a spouse or a partner, to set up a Google calendar ahead of time, just so like they know exactly when you're going to be in class, when you're going to be studying, and like kind of what you need. Just, a little bit of the communication is really important. And so do that so that everyone can kind of be on the same page. And then I would say, like, as we just mentioned, it zips by. So try to find that healthy mix of leaning in and like jumping into all the opportunities that there are too many for you to kind of do everything, but like try to jump into as much as you can, but also make sure you find time to kind of spend time on yourself. I think there was the LO2, we learned about this concept, firehouse time, and you may do the case, you may not, but the concept is you need to have time to yourself and kind of practice some self-care and kind of focus, and more than just like kind of saying, oh, I need time alone. It's, what am I trying to do? Let me center myself and focus on what my goals are, so you don't get lost in kind of the flurry of what it is to do an MBA and work and live.
I think being very clear about your priorities is important for an MBA student. We talk about this a lot on both of our admissions podcasts with current students, because there is so much that's possible. There are so many things to learn about, so many things where you could spend your time, so many different career possibilities. Like you could spend a lot of time on MBA related stuff, but people just don't have that luxury, particularly when you're doing a working professional program. So being really clear about, here's the things that I'm here to get out of this, and this is really where I want to make sure I'm putting my time and energy. That can be really helpful, particularly when you get to those weeks where you are a bit more time crunched, and maybe you have a quarter where you've got a lot going on at work and at home and at school. And so how do you figure out, how do you make those tough calls of like, this is where I'm going to focus right now, and this is what the priority is? Being clear about your priorities and really having a North Star as you go through this experience makes a big difference for students.
100% agree.
And I appreciated your note about being a Gemba format student. When we talk with prospective students on the front end, everybody's so concerned about time, which makes sense, right? You're talking to people at home and at work, and you're telling them, well, this won't be disruptive. I'm just, it's going to fit. Don't worry. Everything, it's not going to be a problem. And so time tends to be on people's minds, when they're making this decision. But once you get into the program, it's kind of the hardest thing to explain to students as they prepare for this is like, I can't tell you what your life is going to look like, but it's going to look different, and you're going to draw back in certain areas, and maybe your life is going to conform to being in the program, and you might actually find that you have more time for things like global residencies than you thought as a prospective student. And you're going to talk to some current students and they're going to tell you should do Gemba, but you're maybe not going to believe it. Then you're going to get into it, and you're going to hear about some of these first global residencies, and you're going to think, gosh, maybe I should have been a Gemba format student.
I cannot echo that enough. I mean, I felt that you're basically taking the thoughts out of my brain, but I felt the same way. I was like, there's no way I can make time for these 4 trips, and people do it. People with and without children do it. People with and without spouses do it. Everyone finds a way. If they want to make it happen, they make it happen. And from what I've heard, the trips to Morocco and India and Germany and Australia were just incredible. And so, anyway, I'm going to do the best of what I can with the best of the time. I'm very excited about Finland and Estonia. I'm going to see if I can get Vietnam on there too, or Spain. So, but yeah, I would agree. I would just say do the Gemba if you can.
Yeah, it's not uncommon for somebody to come back from their global residency and start talking with the Center for Global Initiatives folks about how do I add a second global residency?
Totally.
How can that be done? Or a global client project or some additional global experience there. So, well, Stu, thank you so much for taking some time to connect. It's been a great conversation. Thanks for all your openness and your insights here. And look forward to seeing you at the next weekend residency.
Yeah, man. Anytime, Brett. Thanks.
And that was my interview with Stu Neifert, second-year student in our Executive MBA class of 2025. As always, if you have any comments, suggestions, requests, anything you'd like for us to cover here on the podcast, we're all ears. We can be reached at exec, that's EXEC, MBA at Darden.Virginia.edu. Until next time, stay safe, be well, and thanks for listening.